The voyage of St. Brendan is believed to have occurred between 512 and 530 AD. The earliest mention of his seafaring was written down in the 9th century, and since then, the following narrative has become one of the most famous journeys of exploration in human history. While nobody takes issue with the idea St. Brendan and his crew of monks sailed the Atlantic Ocean for years, the distance they traveled is hotly debated. Some maintain they never left the British Isles. Others say they made it only to Iceland. And a select vocal minority consider them to be the first Europeans to discover America. Without further ado, I bring to you the Voyage of St. Brendan. One evening, St. Brendan was happened upon by a priest named Barinthus, who left the area to visit brethren living in far-flung, isolated monastic cells, like those otherworldly abodes found on the Skellig Islands. St. Brendan rejoiced at his long-awaited return and asked about the trip. After sharing the good condition of the brethren he meant to see, Barinthus brought up a second, unexpected leg to his journey. It featured an encounter with the land of promise of the saints, a spacious and grassy place bearing all manners of fruits. He and his fellow travelers explored the lush, unknown terrain for 15 days straight and found no end. They did, however, discover an impassable river where a man appeared, emanating a great light. He kindly informed them they must return home. The party was guided back to shore, where their boat was moored, and set off into the thick fog from which the Land of Delights had first manifested. St. Brendan and those around him were incensed by the tale. They gave thanks to God for refreshing their spirits by revealing yet another great wonder. Of the many to choose from, St. Brendan plucked 14 brethren from his devoted flock. Together, should God will it, they could reach the heavenly paradise described to them, prepared as ever to place their fate in the hands of the Almighty Creator. These men trekked to the most remote part of Ireland, where they constructed a small boat reminiscent of a big wicker basket covered with skins, called a carrag. Having loaded 40 days' worth of provisions on board, St. Brendan ordered the monks to embark. As they got underway, 3 additional monks from his monastery came running up to them and begged to join the pilgrimage. St. Brendan permitted them to come along, but warned, "One of you has acted well, for God had provided for him an excellent place. But for 2 others he has appointed harm and judgment." The party of 18 set sail against the summer solstice, northward. 2 weeks went by, the wind died down, and they were forced to row the ship till exhaustion set in. What's more, the friars lacked any sense of direction. They soon enough ran out of food, about whence, on the horizon, an island with tall cliffs appeared. After beaching the carrag, a resident dog fawned over St. Brendan, then led the monks to a large mansion boasting a vast hall, couches, ornaments of precious metals, and a dinner table arranged just for them. On the menu, bread and fish. As the monks retired to their cells for the evening, St. Brendan watched a demon at work. With a silver bridle bit in hand, this little devil beckoned to one of the Johnny-come-lately monks. The following morning, St. Brendan told his crew their voyage could not be tainted by theft. The pronouncement compelled one guilty monk to cast away the silver piece from his bosom and plead for forgiveness, as well as prayers that his soul may not be lost. The explorers watched a demon leave the man's body shortly before the soul of the brother departed this life. He was taken up to heaven by angels of light in the sight of his brethren, who gave him a Christian burial. The monks prepared to set sail. As they did, a young fellow referred to as the procurator presented himself. He provided the sailors bread and water, then saw them off. The expeditionary contingent discovered an island blanketed with the white wool of sheep. The flocks there were so numerous, it was difficult to make out the grass. Then they moved on to a neighboring isle, but the boat stopped before reaching the mainland. It struck a sandbar jutting from the seafloor. The monks set foot on the patch, though St. Brendan remained inside the boat, for he knew what manner of island this was, but didn't want to frighten his brethren by telling them. The monks spent the night in prayer outside the boat. Then come sunrise, they celebrated Mass, and after doing so, struck a fire beneath a cauldron to cook meat. As the liquid in the cauldron reached a boil, the island began moving about like a wave, and the monks hurried back aboard the boat. St. Brendan calmed their nerves, informing them it was not an island they were standing on, but a fish, the largest of all that swim in the ocean. Upon reaching the actual island, they floated a mile down one stream, and found at its source a great fountain shaded by a large tree of marvelous width. On the tree sat countless snow-white birds who sang hymns in unison, clapping their wings. One of the birds flew off the tree. In flight, his wings had a tinkling sound like bells. He perched on the boat's prow, near St. Brendan, whom the birdie told, "You and your brethren have been now 1 year on your voyage, and 6 more years journeying awaits you, until you find what you have set your hearts upon, the land of promise of the saints." Following this encounter, St. Brendan and company were tossed around on the billows of the ocean for 3 months, when finally land appeared. After the entire party disembarked, an extremely elderly man took St. Brendan by the hand and led him to a monastery. As St. Brendan stood at the entrance, he asked who was in charge of the monastery, but received no response from the guide, only manual signs. The visitors were treated to dinner and provided a place to stay. Having a moment alone with the monastery's abbot, St. Brendan asked him about the strict rule of silence being observed. The abbot, with reverence and humility, explained that aside from singing praises of God, for 80 years, no voice had ever been raised between the 24 clergy members who resided on the island. Before St. Brendan left, the abbot prophesied to him, referring to the 2 monks remaining of those who tracked down St. Brendan before he left. Of the other 2 monks, one will have his pilgrimage in the island of the anchorites, but the other will suffer in hell, the worst of all deaths. After spending 40 days at sea, an enormous fish began swimming after the boat, spouting foam from its nostrils and plowing through waves in rapid pursuit to devour them. Just as suddenly, another great monster came into view from the west, spouting flames from its mouth and rushing towards the other. The fire-breathing beast slew the first creature, cut it into 3 pieces, and returned whence it came. Their next stop was an isle inhabited by clergymen, where the one good Johnny-come-lately monk found his new home and stayed behind. Regarding the last of the 3 men left, things must have gotten awkward for him in that little crag. There was a day St. Brendan and his fellow mariners saw a column rising from the sea. The massive object was covered over in a rare canopy, the material of which they knew not. But it had the color of silver and was hard as marble, while the column itself was of the clearest crystal. The men positioned themselves alongside the unfamiliar spectacle. St. Brendan said, "Run in the boat now through an opening, that we may get a closer view of the wonderful works of God." As they passed through an arched opening in the iceberg and looked around them, the ocean seemed transparent like glass, so that they could plainly see everything beneath them, even the base of the column, and the skirts of it lying on the ground, for the sun shone as brightly within as without. The friars sailed north for 8 days, where an island manifested. It was rugged and rocky, covered with dry volcanic slag, without trees or herbage, but full of smiths' forges. As the ocean's current pulled them closer to it, which much distressed them, they heard the noise of bellows blowing like thunder, and the beating of sledges on the anvils of iron. One of the inhabitants came forth to do some work. He was all hairy and hideous, begrimed with fire and smoke. When he saw the servants of Christ nearby, he withdrew into his forge, crying, "Whoa, whoa, whoa!" St. Brendan armed himself with the sign of the cross and said to the brethren, "Put on more sail and ply your oars more briskly, that we may get away from this island." Hearing this, the savage man reappeared, rushed down to the shore bearing in his hand tongs with a burning mass of slag, of great size and intense heat, which he flung at once after the servants of Christ. But it did them no harm. Where the molten mass fell into the sea, it fumed up like a heap of burning coals. Soon enough, all the dwellers of the island crowded down to the shore, bearing each of them a large mass of burning slag, which they flung everyone in turn after the servants of God. Then they returned to their forges, which they blew up into mighty flames, so that the whole island seemed one globe of fire. And the sea on every side boiled up and foamed like a cauldron set on a fire well supplied with fuel. All day, even when the island was out of sight, they heard a loud wailing from the inhabitants thereof. Not to mention, a noisome stench was perceptible at a great distance. Believing themselves to be on the confines of hell, another large and high mountain with smoke emanating from its summit came into view. The wind drove the men rapidly towards the island until they almost touched the shore, which featured towering cliffs black as coal and upright like a wall. Here the one monk that remained of the three who tracked down St. Brendan leapt from the boat. He made his way to the foot of the cliff, wailing and crying aloud, "Woe is me, Father, for I am so forcibly torn away from you and cannot return." All the while St. Brendan saw plainly how the wretched man was carried off by a multitude of demons, and was already burning amongst them. He exclaimed, "Woe is yours, unhappy man, who made you so evil an end to your life." As they looked back, they saw the peak of the mountain unclouded and shooting up flames into the sky, which it drew back again to itself, so that the mountain seemed a burning pyre. The crag sailed southward for 7 days, when St. Brendan observed a very dense cloud, on approaching which the shape of a man materialized. The monks sailed directly for the peculiar sight. They found a man sitting on a rugged and shapeless rock, with waves on every side, which in their flowing beat upon him, even to the top of his head, and in their ebbing exposed the bare rock on which the wretched man was sitting. The cloth that hung before his face as the winds tossed the floating object about struck him on the eyes and on the forehead. The person turned out to be Judas. He was momentarily enjoying a break from his usual cycle of torments, during which he burned like a mass of molten lead, day and night, in the heart of the mountain they had just departed. St. Brendan felt moved to stay by his side, and when evening arrived, a multitude of demons crowded around in a circle. They heckled the saint, shouting, "We dare not see the face of our prince until we bring back to him his pet victim. Give us therefore our prey, and keep it not from us this night." The saint declined their request, and at early dawn, when the saint proceeded on his way, a countless multitude of demons covered the face of the deep, uttering dreadful cries, revealing that their chief had scourged them with cruel stripes for failing to bring back his wretched captive. After he sailed far enough from the scene, those demons bore off Judas's wretched soul with great rushing and howling. They next set foot on the rocky, soil-deprived abode of Paul the Hermit. The brethren were amazed by his dress, for he was covered all over from head to foot with the hair of his body, which was white as snow from old age, and no other garment had he save this. Paul made his living by the grace of God, along with the help of a certain animal capable of walking on its hind legs. Every third day, the critter would bring him, in its paws, fish for dinner and dry brushwood to make fires. St. Brendan marveled at the nature of Paul the Hermit's existence, saying, "I see here a man of angelic condition, dwelling still in the flesh, yet unmolested by the vices of the flesh. St. Brendan and company again encountered their procurator. For those who may not remember, this is the man they met on the island with the large mansion with dinner ready to be served. Just before they left there, he introduced himself and provided them provisions for their journey. This time he got into the boat with the servants of God, and they made their way to the aforementioned island of singing birds. There, the procurator turned to St. Brendan and said, "Embark now in your boat, and fill all the water skins from the fountain. I will be the companion and conductor of your journey henceforth. For without my guidance, you cannot find the land you seek, the land of promise of the saints." They packed 40 days worth of provisions, as their course lay to the west for that amount of time. Upon approaching the spiritual oasis, a dense cloud overshadowed the vessel, so dark they could hardly see each other. The procurator told the saint, "This darkness surrounds the island you have sought for 7 years. You will soon see that it is the entrance to it." An hour passed, a great light shone around them, and the boat stood at the shore. When the men of God disembarked, they saw an extensive land thickly set with trees. There seemed to be no night, as light shone from the sky at all hours. After traversing the country for 40 days, and failing to find an end to it, like Berinthus, the adventurers happened upon a large river, which they could not by any means cross over. There, a handsome young man joyfully embraced St. Brendan, along with each monk. The fellow kindly informed them, "Return now to the land of your birth, bearing with you as much of those fruits and of those precious stones which your boat can carry, for the days of your earthly pilgrimage must draw to a close." St. Brendan gathered fruits of the land and various precious stones, wished the good procurator farewell, boarded his vessel, and monks in tow, ventured once more through the dense fog. The explorers found their way back to St. Brendan's monastery, where all his monks gave glory to God for the safe return of their holy patron, and learned from him the wonderful works of God he had heard or seen during his voyage. Alrighty everybody, that's gonna do it for today's video on the voyage of St. Brendan. Let me know in the comments section the real world places you think he could have visited. Don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you next time.